40 past the hour. We're following breaking news this morning from the U.S. Supreme Court. Just last hour, the justices upheld a law that would ban TikTok starting this Sunday if its Chinese parent company does not sell it to an American company. With us now, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley at the U.S. Supreme Court, NBC's Savannah Sellers, who's been covering this story very closely, NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist, and defense attorney Misty Marris. Also with us, former federal prosecutor Christy Greenberg. So, Ryan, what exactly did the justices say in their decision?
So they upheld the law, and I mean, they said that basically the First Amendment concerns that TikTok raised were not enough to overturn this law and keep it from going into effect, specifically because of that foreign ownership, right? So, obviously foreign entities do not have the same sort of First Amendment rights as ones within the United States, and why they said that all of these users within the United States are using this specific platform to, share posts, to communicate with others, that there's nothing banning the government from putting something in place for national security reasons that doesn't allow that company to be owned by a foreign entity. And that was really what was the emphasis here. The judges did not buy into the government's argument so much that this could also be used as a propaganda tool by China, though they did on the national security end in terms of just the raw data and information that the Chinese government could access on Americans, details about their lives, extensive details into, basically being able to identify individuals, figure them out, perhaps trace them. There are a lot of ways that you could get that data and that could be used against for national security reasons that made it a threat to the United States, according to the federal government. So that's what the justices upheld. Of course, Joe Biden has said that he is not going to enforce this for the 36 hours, or rather the fines aren't going to be enforced for that first 36 hours of this law going into effect, because that's Sunday. And, one of the reasons there is because the government is closing down in just a few hours, because there is the federal government overall is closing down because there is that there's in addition to being Inauguration Day on Monday, it is also a federal holiday. So you see a lot of these resignations at the Justice Department already going into effect there. Key people in key roles are going to continue on, but overall, the government is sort of winding down as this administration comes to an end.
So, Savannah, what does this mean for TikTok and the 170 million TikTok users in the U.S.?
So, Jose, I'll start by saying we have not officially heard from TikTok yet, but my sources tell me we will hear from TikTok today, both essentially a reaction to that ruling, but also a little bit more information about what it means moving forward. But the real crux here of what it means for TikTok and what it most likely means for users of TikTok has honestly more to do with what Ryan just pointed out there about the Biden administration not enforcing it than it does the Supreme Court upholding the ban. That announcement yesterday, we actually broke that at NBC News. That took a lot of the air out of, a lot of the pressure out of a ruling from the Supreme Court for TikTok. Obviously, it would have been great for them if they would have just said, nope, this is a violation of free speech. But no one was anticipating that. In that emergency session last Friday, it was pretty clear most, if not all, of the justices were skeptical of TikTok's free speech argument. So if we were anticipating the fact that the Supreme Court was going to uphold that, if you take that as fact, the Biden administration coming in and saying that they are not going to enforce it by not collecting on those fines is a big deal. And I'd actually go a little bit further than what Ryan just said. He said, one of the reasons they're saying is the federal government is closing down. I mean, we've all known this date was coming, and we've all known it was a holiday weekend. We've all known that it was the inauguration the next day. This was the deadline outlined in the law, very specifically, an exact number of days. The same law that President Biden himself signed. So the fact that they are now saying they are not going to collect on those fines is a major reversal, and it's honestly one of the best things that could have happened if you are TikTok, because day one was that big hurdle for them. We know a soon-to-be President Trump has been signaling that he wants to save TikTok, were his words. He has a warm spot in his heart for TikTok. He plans to figure that out, whether that means he does exactly what President Biden is doing for one day for a lot longer, just not enforcing it, meaning not collect fines, or if he's going to do something further to satisfy the law, really try to organize some type of sale, or maybe even something like just an investment in TikTok that he then has the authority, once he's president, to say, hey, that qualifies as that divestiture that I was looking for. What it means, though, for 170 million users, if I were a betting woman, I would say there is a very good chance that not much is going to change for TikTok users right now. They are getting assurances from the places they need it that they will not be punished.
And so, Aaron, kind of reflecting on what, we were just talking about, Savannah was talking about this reversal by the White House. Has there been any clarity just in the last hour or two from the White House about, and then just, is it okay for the executive to ignore a law that was passed and then found to be constitutional?
So not specifically to that question, Jose, and I think the idea of the law being ignored may not be something that has to be dealt with, at least in the very near term. Ryan alluded to the fact that effectively the Biden administration comes to an end at close of business today. It's Friday, and so people will go home, and typically over the weekend things don't happen unless there's an emergency. And so if on Sunday the entities that would be impacted by this law were to take some sort of action or not take the action that the law calls for, there wouldn't be lawyers around immediately filing paperwork to fine these companies on Sunday. Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's a federal holiday, so you wouldn't have that on Monday either. And obviously it's an inauguration day as well. The White House said in a statement from the press secretary earlier today that President Biden still believes that this app, TikTok, should be available to Americans, but that it should be owned by an American company or another company that is in line with the national security concerns of the American government. But given the fact that this law goes into effect on Sunday and there's a new administration coming in on Monday at noon, the Biden administration has taken the position that it won't act on this, that it should be left up to the new administration taking office on Monday. At the same time, we've heard from President-elect Trump himself. He posted on his social media site a little while ago a statement saying the Supreme Court decision was expected and everyone must respect it. My decision on TikTok will be made in the not too distant future, but I must have time to review the situation. Stay tuned. His incoming national security advisor said on television yesterday that they're going to put some measures in place to make sure that TikTok can still continue to function in this country. At the same time, to try to make sure that the national security concerns, the risk that's been talked about, not the necessarily any action that's been taken in violation of national security, but the risk that exists by this app being owned by ByteDance and ostensibly the Chinese government is something that the Trump administration will be taking a look at and trying to address, Jose.
Yeah, Misty, and Aaron was talking about teams of lawyers stepping in. You can expect that always. But what do you make of the Supreme Court's ruling in this case? And then this kind of threading the needle thing on, well, it's not for me to decide, it's for someone else to decide. I'm not going to, how do you read it?
Yeah, Jose, I'm not surprised at all by the Supreme Court's decision, and that's having sat and listened to all of the arguments that took place and hearing the Supreme Court justices, many of them say, we're not even sure if the First Amendment is at issue here because it's not the content of the speech that's being regulated. It's the platform that is a national security concern. Now, the decision reflected that any issue relating to free speech was outweighed by the national security risk, and there's a lot of deference when it comes to national security that really lies with Congress, not the judicial branch of the government. So not surprised by the decision. But now when we're talking about the enforcement and implementation, that's a whole different story. The Biden administration stepping back, we knew that there was only going to be this one day. It was always the 19th. We spoke about it before. Says that, if there's no meaningful impact to these companies, no penalties that will be enforced, there's no incentive to stop TikTok. And then from Trump's friend of the court brief, we know that he's going to try and keep TikTok going and strike up some form of a deal, whether that's an executive order, divestment decision, or something of the like is unclear. But it was pretty clear that once Trump took over, from what he's been saying and that brief, that there was going to be a delay in the implementation, even if it just meant telling the DOJ to back off.
Yeah, and I mean, Christy, let's talk about that, the Trump amicus brief and so much more. What do you read in all of this? And it's just like, and it's back to Savannah's point, everybody knew that this was the date that has been put in the legislation, that nothing is done by, just coincidence, and yet, oh my gosh, maybe we need more time. But how do you read it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the decision is very specific about what the act permits, right? It allows the president to grant a one-time 90-day extension and that's only if the president can make certain certifications to Congress regarding progress towards this qualified divestiture. Now, what exactly does that mean? What does progress mean? I mean, I can anticipate that President Trump can say that he's been engaged in discussions with ByteDance, which owns TikTok, and progress may be defined very loosely there to kind of get him that extension that already exists in the act. That may be one way that he buys himself some time here to be able to try to make a deal. But it's very clear in the crux of this opinion that what the Supreme Court found was a legitimate national security interest was this data collection piece, not so much the algorithm that determines what content should go out to users, but really the data collection piece, just the vast amount of data that the Chinese government has available to them, and the fact that ByteDance has refused in the past the government's efforts here to say, just stop collecting U.S. data, and they've refused to do it, and that can be used by the Chinese government for intelligence purposes. I mean, the opinion goes to great lengths to say that there is a record here from China that justifies this national security interest. So again, I think there's going to be some effort from Trump. It's baked into the act itself that gives him some time here, but there's a real interest that does need to be addressed.
And Ryan, not a lot of division within the magistrates.
Yeah, and actually I just got a statement from the Justice Department coming in on this, on the TikTok decision, said that the court's decision enables the Justice Department to prevent the Chinese government from weaponizing TikTok to undermine America's national security, according to Attorney General Merrick Garland. Authoritarian regimes should not have unfettered access to millions of Americans' sensitive data. The court's decision affirms that this act protects the national security of the United States in a manner that is consistent with the Constitution. The next phase of this effort, implementing and ensuring compliance with the law after it goes into effect on January 19th, will be a process that plays out over time. Of course, the time that Merrick Garland himself is going to have left after that goes into effect is 36 hours, because he will no longer be Attorney General of the United States on Monday. And I should point out that we don't know who the acting Attorney General of the United States is going to be. That person has not been publicly designated by the incoming Trump administration. So we don't even know who's going to really be at the helm, at the controls. And there are all of these variables, all of these very important issues, national security issues, and all of the issues that the Justice Department oversees, that there's still a big question about, even though we're winding down the final business hours of the last day before Donald Trump is actually sworn back as President of the United States. Jose.
Ryan Riley, Savannah Sellers, Misty Marris, and Christy Greenberg, thank you so very much. Aaron, if you